Oof. Today, guys, we have a Tavelo Attack in a size 56/large, weighing in at 7.1 kilograms, and in pounds, 15 pounds and 14 ounces. And stay tuned later as we'll do a free hub sound test on these Craft racing wheels CS5060. Yo, welcome back to the channel, boys and girls. In today's video, we are taking a look at my brand new Tavelo Attack bike because my bike build is finally finished. So in today's video, guys, we're going to be going over the details on this bike, some of the specs, the weight, the price. We're going to be going over some of the good things on this bike that I like. We're going to be going over some of the bad things on this bike because unfortunately there were a lot of quirks when it came to building up this bike. Some things that I'm actually pretty disappointed on. And then of course we're going to be taking this bike out on the road so I can give you some of my first initial thoughts on this bike, because out on the road this bike is a blast to ride. So without further ado, let's begin. Okay guys, so as I mentioned in the introduction of this video, this is my brand new Tavelo Attack frame or bike, whatever you want to call it. Now the retail price on this frame set is $1,580 USD. The sizing on this that I went with is a size large, which is basically size 56. And the color that you see is their Panda color, which is basically a black and white painted finish with sort of a gloss clear coat, as well as these pretty cool looking silvery metallic decals. Now the reason why I was really excited to get this frame in hands is because I'm always looking for the latest and greatest as far as affordable Chinese frame sets goes. Now obviously $1,580, not exactly cheap, but I'm always looking for something in that sort of mid-tier range as far as frame sets goes. I've done the Windspace, I've done the Yolio, I know there's Elves out there which I have not tested yet, but I really like the aesthetics on this frame set, and so that's what really piqued my interest. And especially now when we're seeing a lot of the major brands going with the whole one bike to rule them all sort of design language, this frame at this price point really piqued my interest, and this is why I went ahead and paid for it with my own money. Okay, starting with some of the details on this Tavelo Attack frame set, let's first start with the front. So of course we are rocking a Shimano Altegra 12-speed Di2 setup. I really have been liking the electronic shifting on the latest Shimano Groupset. I actually prefer it a little bit more than the SRAM ETAP. The ergonomics on the levers are really good. The shifting is lightning fast, and I absolutely love the brake feel on the levers when it comes to braking. Next up, moving to the crankset, we are rocking a 5339 crankset here in Chicago where it's pancake flat. I need all the gears I can on the flats to keep up with some of these super strong sprinters in my area. And then as far as the power meter goes, as you can see, we are rocking the Magene PES base spider-based power meter. So far it's been really accurate as far as the power goes. The retail on this, I want to say with the spider power meter and chain rings, is about $325, which is a fantastic price. And the beautiful thing with this crankset is it works with your standard Shimano 24 bottom bracket, which is a really nice touch. One thing I do want to note is Shimano Altegra Di2 12-speed. Now for the front derailleur, I was told that the max chainring size is a 5236, and even though this is a 5339, shifting with the front mech, it's been pretty good. Not perfect, but it works just well enough to where if you are doing a lot of climbing and you're having to constantly change between your big ring to your small ring, there isn't any problems with shifting goes. You just have to make sure that you have everything set up perfectly as recommended by the manufacturer. And then moving out back, as far as the cassette goes, we are rocking an 11 to 30 12-speed cassette Altegra. And then as you can see, we have this very tasty looking Nova to Ride oversized pulley wheel system. This thing looks really, really great. Now, as far as drivetrain efficiency, whether or not this actually helps the efficiency, who really knows? And quite frankly, I don't really care because I just love the way that it looks. So we have the Nova to Ride oversized pulley wheel system, and you can't really see it, but I'm also rocking Nova to Ride's ceramic bottom bracket as well, in a BB86 for Shimano 24 standard. Yikes, I almost forgot about the handlebars. So the integrated cockpit that you see here, this is from FarSports. This is their F1S series of handlebars. I really like these a lot. The ergonomics on them is fantastic, and they feel really comfortable in the drops. But the most important thing with these, which I love, is that they are super duper stiff. So when you're out of the saddle, when you're sprinting, They feel very, very stiff. Now, as far as the specs goes, I went with a 130 millimeter length stem, and then the width on the handlebars is 38 centimeters. The angle of the stem is, I believe it's -10, but these things are very, very comfortable. Not the cheapest set of integrated cockpit that you can find. These are like $400 USD, but they are very, very stiff, and the ergonomics on them are wonderful. Then, of course, we have Supacaz Bartape. I know you guys have called me out in the past about my crappy job of wrapping the handlebars, but let me know in the comments down below, how did I do this time? Do you like the way they look? Did I wrap them well this time? If you don't like them, let me know in the comments down below. But if you love them, also let me know in the comments down below. Now, as far as saddle goes, this is my S-Works power saddle. The width on this is 143 millimeters. Of course, you have the oversized carbon rails, and the weight on this is pretty decent. I want to say the weight for this saddle is like 167 grams. Pretty decent. Again, not the cheapest thing in the world, but it just really keeps me locked in when I'm putting down the power. Now, moving on to the wheels, these wheels are very special. Now, I've already done an unboxing and first look on these wheels, but these are my CRW Craft racing wheels, or Racing Works, whatever they're called, but this is their CS 5060 line of wheels. We have 50 millimeter depth in the front, then in the rear we have 60 millimeters, but they're super duper light, only 16 spokes, carbon spokes, but these things just float over rough pavement. I like these wheels a lot, and they very much complement the overall looks and aesthetics of this Tavelo Attack frame set. Okay, next up, we have to talk about some of the negatives on this frame set, because as much as this frame and bike as a whole looks beautiful in my opinion, there were some problems building up this frame, things that were very annoying, and that I've actually was pretty disappointed on, considering how much I paid for this frame set. So number one, let's talk about the through axles in the front fork. So for some reason, the tolerance on the holes inside of the fork, the tolerances are so tight that it is extremely difficult to put the through axle in, even with a little bit of general purpose grease. But some reason I basically have to physically force the through axle into the fork, which could of course compromise the disc rotor. You could possibly bend it and stuff, but it is very annoying that every time I take the front wheel off, I have to basically jam the through axle in order for it to finally thread into place. The second issue that I have, and I don't know if this is an issue with either FarSports or the frame itself, maybe there's some paint overspray, but the 3D printed plastic headset cover, it rubs on the top of the headset bearing cup, meaning that once you have everything properly torqued down, it made it basically impossible to rotate the handles left and right. So what I had to do is I had to spend about a good hour sanding down the bottom, or the bottom side of the plastic headset cap, as well as sanding down some of the paint overspray for the upper headset bearing. This is pretty annoying. Again, this is a $1,600 frame, and I've had some frames that cost $500 that have not had this problem. So again, I don't know if this is a problem with Tavelo with the overspray on the paint, or perhaps FarSports needs to sort of rework their 3D printing for the headset cover, but it was very annoying that I had to sand down to in order to have the proper amount of free play left and right with the handlebars. Now, some of the other negatives that I had with building up this frame set had to do with the chainstays. Now, routing the hydraulic cable through the chainstay, that was no problem. That was the fit and finish on that inside of the frame. That was a-okay, no issues there. However, when it came time to route the Di2 cable to the rear mech, for some reason there must have been some very sharp edges inside of the chainstay, to the point that it was very difficult. I spent like 40 minutes trying to route the Di2 cable. That was even with using the Park Tools routing cable kit. But for some reason, it would always get stuck somewhere in the chainstay, which is very annoying, because obviously you don't want to cut or pinch the Di2 cable. I've never had that problem before with any other bikes I've had when it comes to routing cables through the chainstays. But again, I don't know if this is just growing pains with Tavelos, but it was very annoying. It was a pain in the butt that I had to even troubleshoot that to figure out why I could not get the Di2 cable through the chainstay. Another pretty annoying issue has to do with this rubber cover that goes over the bolt to clamp down the seat post. It's pretty loose. This is about what I would expect for like a $500 frame, and I've even had some frames at the price point where the tolerance on the rubber cap was a lot tighter than this. So again, Tavelo, I think you guys could do better with this because again, $1,600, I don't want some janky ghetto loose rubber cover for my seat post in the bolt. And two more issues that I had with this frame, one of them being more or less subjective, is when I ordered the frame from Tavelo, they told me that the 7x9 saddle rail clamp for carbon saddles was included in the price. And when I received the frame set, it was not, which is frustrating because if you were ordering this frame with the intentions of using a carbon railed saddle and it's not included, that means you have to go with your traditional 7x7 rails like a steel or titanium saddle. Now, thankfully for myself, I actually had a spare set of clamps for carbon saddles from my Windspace T1500 frame set that I got like 2 years ago. So I was able to fit this saddle on here, this special or S-Works carbon saddle. But I just need to know, Tavelo, let me know in the comments or maybe let your customers know whether or not it's included in the price or if we have to actually pay extra for that saddle rail clamp. And then the final thing, which is a little bit subjective on my part, is I've noticed with the decals on here, this sort of brushed metal finish on the decals. They are really, really nice. I like the way that they look, but it's because they're sort of raised, that tells me that the decals were applied after they finished the clear coat. And I would prefer, in my case, I would prefer that the decals be underneath the gloss. Now again, this is just a personal preference of mine, but I can imagine that this is going to be very easy to scratch because they are above the surface. Okay, now that I got all of those negatives out of the way, let's talk about some of the things I really like on this bike as far as aesthetics go. So number one is the caliper mounts and the bottom bracket area. They were faced very, very well. They were faced just as good as my giant Propel frame set was. I had no issues with installing the bottom bracket, the Nova to Ride ceramic bottom bracket. And as far as aligning the rotors to the calipers, both the front and back took about maybe 10 minutes top. So it's right up there with the giant Propel, and that frame set cost like $3,000. So kudos to Tavelo. Fantastic job on facing with the frames. Another thing I really like about this frame set is despite the fact of my issue with the decals potentially being above or over the gloss finish, the quality of the paint itself is it's primo. It's really, really good. It's right up there with all of the bigger brands that I've tested and seen in person. So kudos to Tavelo on that front for doing a fantastic job on the paint for this frame set. Now, some of the other things that I really, really like about this frame is I really like the design, the sort of geometry, the aesthetics of this frame. As you guys can see, it does lend itself to being reminiscent of like a Tarmac SO7. And obviously that bike was very, very popular for a lot of different reasons. One is it had a really good blend of being sort of kind of aerodynamic as well as also being sort of lightweight. Makes sense, right? Because it is sort of your one bike to rule them all. So I think for Tavelo's sake, I think that this frame is going to be a classic frame for years to come. It's going to be pretty popular for the price point. And speaking of the weight on this, that's one of the other things I really like about this frame as well is, believe it or not, this frame set, even though it has white paint, actually is the lightest frame set that I've ever tested or weighed on this channel. For this size large in a white finish, which normally white is normally the heaviest color when it comes to paint, this clocks in just a hair over 1,000 grams for the frame set. So good job Tavelo on that front, and it does fit in with the whole one bike to rule them all standard. Free hub sound test on the CRW CS5060 wheels with the ceramic bearings in the back and carbon spokes, all the other crap. Let's go. So now that I said all that stuff, all the quirks, all the things like that, let's go ahead and take this bike out on the road so I can give you sort of my on the road thoughts on this bike. Now keep in mind, this will be just sort of my first initial impressions, and that a longer term review will come later on this channel. Panda power! Man, talk about cultural appropriation with this jersey. But anyway, shout out to Joe from Panda Podium. Anyway, so we are riding the Tavelo Attack frame set. Some of my first thoughts on this right away is this bike feels premium. It definitely feels like a frame set as an entire package. It definitely feels like it punches above the asking price for this frame set. And what that means is this bike feels similar to my Windspace
T1500 in that it's very responsive. I really like the way this bike corners. It feels almost go-karty. Now granted, if you look at the specs and the geometry for this frame set, the shorter wheelbase lends itself to have that sort of darty feeling in the corners. But yeah, I like the way this thing corners. It's very composed. Another thing I'm really surprised with, now granted this could be because of the choice of wheels I'm using, I really like the way this frame set and bike handles rough pavement. You know, that's always one thing I've criticized the sort of more affordable Chinese frame sets, is that they don't handle very well over rough pavement, but this one collectively as a whole handles bumps very, very well. I would even say this bike is slightly more comfortable over rough pavement than my Windspace T1500. It's hard to say, but so far I'm really loving this frame, guys. Now obviously having to sort out all the issues I've had with this frame set, now that I have all that stuff fixed, this bike is very comfortable. The fit and finish after all that, as far as how this bike looks out on the road, top notch. The paint quality is really, really good. No creaks, no rattles, nothing like that. Everything feels very, very premium. Now, I think the Giant Propel Advanced Pro that I've been testing for the past couple of months, I think this would be a good comparison to that frame set. Now, of course, this frame is like half the price of that. However, the geometries of both of these are pretty much identical. This one probably has a little bit of a lower stack, and then the Giant Propel has a longer reach, but overall as a whole they feel pretty similar. I will say the Giant Propel is ever so slightly a little bit more dampened in the frame. Perhaps that could be the quality of carbon they use, but considering I've used this set of wheels, tires and tubes exactly with the Giant Propel, I would give the kudos to the Giant Propel in terms of how it's dampened over rough pavement. This bike is just so much fun. I think anyone who would make the purchase for this frame set is going to enjoy it a lot. Of course, I'll have to do a long-term review on it, but it's such an enjoy to ride. It's just so go-karty is the best way I can describe it. Like, it just wants to go, 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 of course. It's not this all-out cruiser, but it just really wants to handle and take the super-duper tight turns. Now, the reason why the Specialized Tarmac SO7 was so revolutionary at the time is because it had a really fantastic balance of being not too super aero and not being too super lightweight, but it had a good balance of the both. And so it makes sense why the way this bike is set up, this Tavelo Attack, this makes sense why it's set up the way that it is. It's obviously, you know, not some super duper all-out aero frame set like a Scott Foil, but nor is it some sort of all-out climbing bike like a Trek Imanda. And I think that Tavelo has done a good job with this. Obviously there are some small quirks they have to figure out as far as the fit and finish, things like that, but you get a pretty good lightweight frame set, and it works very well together, all these small pieces. I also think too, just how the Tarmac SO7 will go down as one of the better bikes of this generation, of sort of one bike to rule them all. I think in terms of Chinese affordability and just quality, I think that this Tavelo Attack frame is also going to go down as one of the classic frame sets down the road, similar to the way the T1500 frame set is to me. Now, as you guys know, I keep bringing up that frame a lot because at the price point, the fit and finish, I think they're very comparable in that sense. But for this one, yeah, because it is sort of a one bike to rule them all design language, I think this one is going to last for years to come as well. When it comes to climbing out of the saddle on this frame set, now of course I live in Chicago where it's pancake flat. We don't really have any hills at all. We might have a couple of punchy bridges that go over main highways, but when you are out of the saddle, this bike feels responsive in that regard as well. It has a really good balance, and I think too, because of the lightweight of the frame set relative to the price point and just the way that the geometry and the wheelbase is set up on this frame, it does really like to dance when you are out of the saddle going up small punches. I do again just want to stress that I wasn't very satisfied with some of the quirks that I had to deal with this frame set. $1,500, now granted that's not, you know, a big name brand as far as price goes, but even for $1,600, the quirks that I experienced with this bike build, from trying to install the Di2 cable to having to sand down the plastic 3D printed headset cap, I shouldn't have to do that at all. I didn't have to do it with my Windspace. I've only had to do it with one other bike, and that bike only cost me $1,600. So really having to do any sort of troubleshooting in that regard due to the fit and finish of a frame set at this price point, is unacceptable in my opinion. Now, this could just be growing pains with Tavelo, I don't know, but just fair warning, guys, make sure you do your due diligence before you go ahead and give your money. But I can say, as far as the performance of this bike, definitely really good. In regards to my bike fit, now I do want to mention that I did get a professional bike fit a couple of years ago. So despite the fact that I have a pretty aggressive bike fit, I have a pretty tall saddle to handlebar drop. My handlebars is almost slam. So despite the fact that my bike setup is pretty aggressive for a recreational rider, this bike is very comfortable when you get to faster speeds. One thing I've noticed with my Giant Propel is when you are going slow and you're putting around, my bike fit is not exactly comfortable in that regard. But the thing is, the faster you're going, the more power you're putting down, the more comfortable it just feels on the Giant Propel, and it's no different with this Tavelo attack frame as well. The faster I'm going, the more just locked in and just more in tune, and just how at one I am with this frame set. Everything put together just works so harmoniously, and you just feel like you could just put the hammer down, corner it, hit the apex, and then just hammer right out of it. I actually can't remember the last time I used the word confidence inspiring, but this frame, that's how I also would describe this frame set so well. When the speeds get fast, it definitely adds a lot of confidence as far as the handling goes. It's very well controlled over rough pavement. Again, this is just a first ride, so I don't want to say too much because only time would tell. But if I was to make a guesstimation, if I was to guess, or if I had to pick a frame that I was going to use on some crazy climbs out in the Swiss, while I was spending a lot of time going uphill out of the saddle, and then I had to do some fast descents downhill, this frame would probably be the one I would take. Of course, it's too early to say, but just the way this ride feels firsthand, it feels that good. Now, you're gonna probably ask me, why would I not take my Giant Propel? Because it's too expensive. I don't want to be taking my $7,000 bike on an airplane and worry about the chain stains cracking due to the airport ruining it. But for this bike, for a $1,500 frame set, I would take that gamble. It's gonna handle just as well. Is this frame gonna be exactly one for one for a Giant Propel? Probably not, but by no means is the Giant Propel, as far as the price of the frame, by no means is that frame worth twice the price in terms of performance.
So that is going to wrap up today's video, guys. Of course, I will be doing a longer term review on this bike once I've put a lot more miles on it. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and I'm gonna check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for all of your support over these last 3 years. And I will check you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.